In this video, we are going to discuss the pattern of the SNAP. So SNAP is conducted by the Symbiosis International University for admission into a lot of their prestigious programs, including SIBM Pune, SCM HRD Pune, SIMS, SIMC, SSBF, and so on. So there are a lot of institutes under the Symbiosis International University umbrella, and all of them will consider the SNAP for admission to their postgraduate programs. So in terms of the test is conducted in a computer-based format, meaning that everyone who is appearing for this particular test in a particular slot will be getting the same set of questions. Now this test is typically conducted across 3 slots, wherein there will be 3 different tests held on 3 different days, out of which you will have to choose one or many and appear for the test on those days. Typically, this test happens somewhere in the month of December and January. So there might be a couple of slots that are opened in the month of December and one in January, or one in December and 2 in January. So typically it happens across 3 slots. Now the marking scheme is fairly straightforward. For every correct answer, you get 1 mark. For every incorrect answer, you invite a penalty of 0.25 marks. And if you look at the normalization that is done, so typically there has been no normalization that has been done over the last couple of years. Of course, if things change, you will get to know it. But in terms of the historical pattern of the SNAP, there has been no normalization across slots. So they believe genuinely that the papers are of the same level of difficulty across each of these 3 slots. And that's why there is no need to normalize the scores across the 3 slots. In terms of the key differences from the CAT, the first bit is that it is an out-and-out speed-based test. So you have to attempt 60 questions in 60 minutes. So it's a very short test, and there are quite a few questions that you have to attempt at a faster pace. So you have to be able to answer each and every question on an average of 1 minute. Right? So that's basically what makes it slightly different from the CAT. It is an out-and-out speed-based test. The second thing that makes it different from the CAT is the presence of vocabulary questions, critical reasoning questions, and grammar-based questions. So you will be expected to know these concepts beyond the CAT, and that's basically what makes SNAP slightly different compared to what CAT looks like. And in terms of the third key difference, there will be verbal reasoning question types, wherein you will have to be good at a lot of different reasoning question types, which might include syllogisms, sequential output, strengthening an argument or weakening an argument, cause and effect, courses of actions, again probably true, probably false. So all these kind of question types you might have to be good at if you are preparing for the SNAP, because these questions can appear as a part of the verbal reasoning part. Now if you look at it in depth, if you look at the SNAP 2023 pattern, which was the latest SNAP that was conducted, there were 3 sections that were there. The first section is general English, which constitutes of reading comprehension, verbal reasoning, and verbal ability. Then followed by an analytical and logical reasoning section and a quantitative data interpretation and data sufficiency section. So if you look at the number of questions, for the general English section, there were 15 questions that were there. In terms of the analytical and logical reasoning section, there were 25 questions, and in terms of the quantitative DI and DS section, there were 20 questions that were there. So 15, 25, 20, total of 60 questions that are there. In terms of the level of difficulty, you can see the indicative levels of difficulty for SNAP 2023, but otherwise you have to approach each SNAP as it will be different from this year, right? As if it would have been different from this year's SNAP. Now, in terms of the general English section that had reading comprehension and the other verbal ability parts that were there, if you look at the kind of questions that were asked, you had to identify the parts of speech from the given poem. So poem was given to you, and then you had to identify which part of speech will a particular phrase or word stand for, right? So that's basically something that constituted 2 questions. Then you have to choose the sentence with the correct usage. So there were 5 questions wherein you had to select a question that had the correct usage. Again, there were fill in the blanks questions that were there, figures of speech questions that were there, antonym based, proverb based, and idiom based questions that were there. So you can see that it will not take a lot of time for you to finish this particular part or this particular section when it comes to the SNAP. So 15 questions were there, which you could have easily managed in roughly 8 to 10 minutes. So that is more or less where you can save time and you can invest it into the other sections. Now speaking about the other sections, there was this analytical and logical reasoning section, and again, as you can see on the screen, it had a lot of question types that were there which you might not find at the CAT or many other entrance tests. So you had questions from syllogisms, wherein you had to figure out how can you interpret or what conclusions can you draw from a set of statements that would have been given to you. Then you had statement and course of action. So there would have been one statement that would have been given to you, followed by a couple of courses of action. You had to figure out which course of action would work best in that particular scenario, keeping all stakeholders in mind. Followed by critical reasoning questions, which were inference based questions. So what is the inference that you can draw from a particular passage or a paragraph, right? So there were a couple of questions based on critical reasoning. Then statement and assumption. So which of these assumptions is implicit or are implicit in a particular statement that would have been made, or a particular course of action that would have been carried out. Then there were cause effect based questions. So there will be two statements. One of them can be the cause for the other statement, and the other statement will be the effect of a particular thing, or they could be causes, or they could both be effects of a common cause. They could be effects of independent causes, and so on. So all those things could have been a part of these cause effect kind of questions. Similarly, logically correct sequence. So there might have been 5 words that will be given to you, and you have to arrange these words in the form of a logical sequence. So it could be anything. It could be a process wherein you will start with something, then go to the next step, then go to the next step, and so on and so forth. So that is one question type that you can expect at the SNAP. Now, in terms of non-verbal reasoning, these are mostly questions which are based on patterns, which are mostly based on series, and so on and so forth. So in terms of the questions that were asked at the recent SNAP, you had to complete the series. So there were numerical series or alphabetical series or alphanumeric series that were there. There were some 3 questions that were based on these, and you had to complete the series or provide an element which will continue the series in a logical format. Similarly, there were a couple of questions based on circular arrangement, some questions based on clocks, family tree, coding, decoding, and some miscellaneous questions. It could be in the form of puzzles, it could be in the form of magic squares, missing numbers, and so on. So there were miscellaneous question types as well as a part of the analytical and logical reasoning section. In terms of the quantitative DI and DS section that was there, so again, as we discussed earlier, there were 20 questions that were a part of the QA DI DS section, out of which 7 questions were from arithmetic, which means that arithmetic had a very high weight in terms of this entire test. Similarly, modern mathematics was the second largest bit. So modern mathematics consists of questions which involve permutations, combinations, arrangements, probability, set theory, and arithmetico-geometric progressions, right? So all those things are a part of modern math, and there were 7 questions that were present from modern math. Similarly, geometry contributed to 3 questions, and numbers, algebra contributed to 1 question each. There was 1 question from data interpretation, which cannot be classified under any of the other heads, and that's why we classified it separately as DI. And these were the 20 questions that were present in the QA DI DS section. Now, typically what happens is you have to attempt almost every question that is there. Typically, people will attempt around 50 to 55 questions in most sessions. But then again, you have to be very accurate as well in terms of your score that you are going to get, right? Because accuracy plays a big role. Anything above 40 or 45 should give you a good shot at most of the colleges that are under the Symbiosis umbrella. And that should be a decent enough score to target when it comes to appearing for this particular test. That was all we had in terms of the pattern of the SNAP, the kind of sections that are there, the kind of question types that appear, so that you can prepare accordingly for this particular test.